Hello and welcome to Pursuit of a Perfect System and my review for the IsoTek Genesis One, which you can see behind me there on the desk. And I think the Genesis One is a very exciting product, to me at least, because it represents, I think, the biggest advancement that we've seen in HiFi System power. And I think the benefits of it are really very obvious, and we'll get into those in a minute. IsoTek are an English company with manufacturing facilities in Europe. They offer a range of products from very affordable up to serious investment level, both in terms of money and the space required to have them. The Genesis One is from the company's Mosaic range. When IsoTek started to release their One products, maybe about 18 months ago, at first I couldn't really see where they was going with them. But after thinking about it more and thinking about what IsoTek actually stands for, isolation technology, having individual power components to power individual HiFi components, essentially having monoblock power products, made sense. It's interesting that IsoTek have been a little bit more forward thinking than that, and they've made the One products linkable. So essentially you can daisy chain them together, which means that you only need one wall socket mains plug to power 6 different One products. The form factor of the Genesis One is my only real gripe with it. It's thin, and from certain angles I think it's quite sexy, but it's deep, real deep, about as deep as Simon Cowell's pockets. This is fine and just a byproduct of the internals and the design of the unit, but it's something to pay attention to if you're short on space or if you already have an existing rack, because it's not only the length of the Genesis One you need to pay attention to, you need to be mindful of where you're going to be plugging into it, which is on its very rear. So when you measure the Genesis One, also take into account the size, thickness and type of plug you're going to be plugging into it, because it really does make quite a significant difference in terms of its size. Now, it's not the end of the world if you buy it and make that mistake, because you can use the Genesis One at a bit of an angle, such as I had to. But I know how OCD some audiophiles are, and they like to have things with pure symmetry. So again, get your tape measure out and make sure you measure twice and buy once. Build quality for the Genesis One, I think, is excellent. It feels heavy, it feels solid, and confidence reassuring. You can choose to pay a premium with the Genesis One and have that really nice display on the front. And the display is very interesting. It shows some quite informative and useful information, but that display does come at quite a premium, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what is the Genesis One? It is a single cell wave generation system, which is really technical speak, I think, for the fact that it is a mini power station. Genesis One can newly create 100 watts of low noise, stable electricity, which means it's not suitable for amplifiers or any other high current devices, but it is perfectly suited to source components, preamplifiers, digital components and such like. And I think very interestingly, it's got a little trick up its sleeve. If you want to use it with a product that will initially draw more current than 100 watts, it will disengage the generation circuit, let the mains electricity through, and then once the component settles back down to 100 watts or less, the generation circuit kicks back in. Now that is very clever thinking from IsoTek. Inside the Genesis One is a linear power supply based Class D amplifier, and that is used to create and generate the new electrical signal, and I find that extremely clever. And if you look inside the top of the chassis, you can see 2 toroidal transformers, which is again very interesting and probably the reason for the very long and deep form factor. Paying attention to the screen on the front, we can see lots of interesting information about the incoming signal, the voltage, the noise that's on there, and what's interesting about it is you can then compare that to the outgoing signal. Look how stable the voltage is and look how low the noise is by comparison to how it starts. More interesting, I think, is seeing how the products you plug into the Genesis One have an effect on the mains. You can see how they affect even the noise that's being generated by the Genesis One, the clean signal that's being generated. And why that's interesting is because it reaffirms why we need these products in the first place. I started my serious testing of the Genesis One by powering the Cord Electronics Hugo 2 TT DAC, which I've also got in for review at the moment. I didn't give the Genesis One an easy time because before that I was powering that DAC from the IsoTek EVO3 Nova, which is a very high quality, premium and high-end, full HiFi System power conditioning product, which I've literally just reviewed. And if you'd like to see that review, I'll put a link at the top there. Instantly, I preferred the sound of my review system with the DAC being powered from the Genesis One. So much so that I wanted to try things out more. So I changed to power the Chord Electronics Hugo M Scaler from the Genesis One. And again, there was instant and immediate benefits for doing that, but at the same time, some of the sound seemed to get worse. And that was, I think, because I was no longer powering the TT2 with the Genesis One. Now, in an ideal world, this is where I would have pulled out a second IsoTek Genesis One, linked the two together and had clean and stable voltage for both Chord Electronics DAC products. But unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, and I had to do the next best thing. Now, I remember out in Munich when I filmed a presentation from IsoTek, Keith Martin said that if you want to kind of save a little bit of money, then you can use one of the IsoTek Geminis, which is really a two-way filtering power conditioner, but you can use it as a two-way splitter. So you power the Gemini from the Genesis One, and therefore you have two products being powered with the clean, stable voltage of the Genesis One. And at this point, I decided to make the chain as complex as possible, but the end results, well, they spoke for themselves. Bear with me. From the wall, I was powering the IsoTek EVO3 Nova. From one of the high current power outlets of the EVO3 Nova, I was powering the IsoTek Genesis One. From the IsoTek Genesis One, I was powering the IsoTek Gemini, which gave me the two sockets so that I could power both the Chord digital DAC components, the Hugo M Scaler and the Hugo TT2. So even though that seemed very complex, the end result was a bit of a revelation for me. And it wasn't because I was all of a sudden hearing things I'd never heard before and, you know, angels were falling from the sky. It wasn't because of those reasons. It was just how the music flowed. And I think with digital, sometimes digital-based hi-fi systems can be a little bit mechanical sounding. With the system set up this way, the music flowed in such a smooth and organic, I'm going to use the word musical way, and it was a really big improvement to the sound of my review system, one that I was not prepared to go back from. And if you want to get some idea of the sound quality and what I'm talking about, check the video up linked up the top there, because that is a demonstration video to give you some idea of what I'm going on about. I can hear you shouting, what was the technical reasons for hearing these sound improvements, especially with the way the Chord Electronics DAC products are powered? It's a really difficult one for me to answer, and I hold my hands up and say I don't have the technical reasons. I put it down to the fact that the Genesis One is putting out a stable 230 volt signal, as opposed to the fluctuating mains that I would normally get and the higher voltage that I would normally get. I put it down to that, but to be honest, I hold my hands up. I don't know. And do I care? Not really. All I care about is how the system sounded and whether the system sounded better that way or worse, and it sounded significantly better, much, much better. So let me talk about the price of the Genesis One. So with the screen, it costs just under £2,500. Now you can save about £500 if you choose to have a Genesis One without the screen, without the display. So it is quite a hefty premium being asked for that display. So it's up to you whether you think the display is worth it or not. It is very cool, it is very interesting to look at, and it is very useful in certain ways, but you could quite easily turn it off, live without it, save £500, which could be extremely useful for another area of your hi-fi system. I'm thinking maybe for spending it on a really high quality power cable to power the Genesis One, because that really makes a difference, or spend it on two really high quality power cables to power from the Genesis One and then power something else. Whatever you want, £500 can be used to buy a lot of things, but the screen is very cool. So each to their own on that one. So for my final thoughts of the Genesis One, I said at the start of this video that I thought the benefits of a product like this would be pretty obvious, and I hope throughout this review period the benefits have come across in how I've described the Genesis One as a product. But even when you break it down and think, you know, if that is the equivalent of a mini power station being several inches away from your HiFi component, as opposed to several miles away being shared by everybody and all your other HiFi components, that's got to be better, isn't it? That's got to be a better way of doing it. And I even like the idea of having one mini power station per HiFi component. Maybe not the most practical and maybe not the most cost-effective way to do it, but probably the best. Looking at the IsoTek One range in general, I like certain parts about it. I really like the fact that it's scalable, the fact you can upgrade over time, which means it's not such a big initial outlay. And it also means you're not paying for the plug sockets on a full conditioner that you're not going to use. So there are benefits to that, but I suppose the negatives are that you are paying for several lots of metal and you are paying out for several lots of construction costs and packaging costs and shipping costs, which obviously get all incorporated if you buy one whole complete unit. So pros and cons, I think, to every system. I'm going to close out this review by saying the IsoTek Genesis One has made a really big impression on me this year, and it opened my eyes to a new type of product, a new way of doing things, and the benefits are obvious to me, immediately obvious to me. And that is the reason why I've decided to give the IsoTek Genesis One the Best Power Product Award of the year. So I hope you've enjoyed the review. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you did, make sure to hit the thumbs up button. We really appreciate that support, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hitting the notification bell to get nudges for all the new videos I create, and I create a lot of new videos. I want to thank you for watching this review, and I'll be seeing you soon. Take care. Bye.